Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week, I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect, not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. I wanted to broach the subject of working on yourself because that's something that comes up quite often when I'm talking with parents who are unwillingly estranged from their adult child or children. Parents who are brave enough to be vulnerable will say things like, "I know I need to work on me," or "I've done a lot of work on myself." And if you're able to use your time at all constructively during estrangement, you're doing very well. There are parents out there who are just trying to keep their heads above the emotionally turbulent waters of estrangement. And for them, the idea of using this time for personal healing and growth seems like a luxury they can't yet afford. So if you have the time, energy, and support you need for personal development right now, then it means that you have the luxury of choosing where to place your energy and attention, and that is a gift. I have just a couple of concerns about this idea of working on yourself. Namely, there are at least 4 harmful misconceptions that I've noticed about why parents are encouraged to embrace personal work during estrangement from their adult children. And correcting these misconceptions may be critical to your success. So here are the first couple. The first misconception is that working on yourself is separate and apart from repairing your relationship with your children. It is not. Not only is personal work not separate from relationship repair, in some cases it may be the only work needed for relationship repair, especially when it comes to parent-adult-child relationships. Of course, our emotional health and wellness affect all our relationships, but the parent-child relationship is uniquely influenced by a parent's well-being throughout life. So the relationship between you and your child or children is not only influenced, but shaped and can be changed by the relationship you have with yourself. Any personal growth in you is a relationship development between yourself and your adult son or daughter. That's exactly the reason for the roadmap that I outlined in episodes 97 through 99 of this podcast. The roadmap emphasizes the need for healing, learning, and growth before you attempt to involve your estranged adult child in any efforts at reconciliation. If you're not familiar with that roadmap to reconnection, you can find those 3 episodes at reconnectionclub.com/97. The roadmap is my sincere attempt to put myself out of business, so I hope you get familiar with that. Never forget that working on yourself is not a separate activity from working on your relationship with your child. It is the work in many and perhaps most cases. The second misconception about working on yourself during estrangement as a parent is that it's just sort of something to do while you're waiting for things to improve. The problem here is mainly with the word waiting, as if all the important developments happen on the other side and you're just going to get the memo afterward. It may be that your adult child is engaged in personal work that has its own timeline, and therefore there might be nothing you can do to resume contact before she or he is ready. But there's an underlying assumption here related to that first misconception, which is that any personal work you're doing is separate and therefore has no effect on the current relationship, especially if your child doesn't know about it. This is false. In reality, the work you're doing could directly influence your estranged adult child's attitude and timeline in ways you and I can't predict. Everything you do, say, and don't say, and the way you feel about what's happening, it's all based on where you are in your own journey. How you respond to estrangement is a projection of the personal work you're doing right now. Imagine just knowing what to do about contact without having to consult someone like me, or without listening to this podcast. I believe that level of knowledge will become available to you when you give yourself wholeheartedly to the right personal work. And by right personal work, I mean whatever healing, learning, or growing has been quietly knocking on the door to your heart and asking if you're ready. In the second part of this 2-part episode, I'll cover 2 more misconceptions about working on yourself. But before I wrap up today, let me say a few words about what to do if you want to feel like you're working on something, but you're not sure what to work on. First, if you have or suspect you might possibly have relational trauma in your history, whether from abuse or neglect earlier in life, please seek therapy with a qualified local trauma specialist. It's okay to approach a specialist even if you're not sure you have trauma. The reason I make this suggestion is because I regularly meet people who've studied nonviolent communication, dialectical behavior therapy, and other worthwhile techniques. But despite years of practice and even therapy, their trauma remains intact because it's never been treated directly. So I hope you will consider working with a trauma specialist if you might have trauma. And I'll put some links in the show notes to help you with that. As for what else to work on, whether you have trauma or not, one thing I encourage every parent to cultivate is self-compassion. This is something many of us need to work on. It's a great foundation for any other personal growth you might want to invite into your life. Self-compassion is a practice, not just a feeling. It means actively treating yourself with kindness and consideration. It also entails replacing constant self-criticism or unnecessary judgment with trying to understand yourself when you make mistakes or experience strong feelings. Increasing self-compassion isn't just a nice to have, it's essential for parents of estranged adult children. I'll revisit the concept of working on yourself in the next episode. To sum up the misconceptions I'm addressing in this 2-part series, the first part of which you just heard, here are those 4 misconceptions. I'm going to refer to them now as myths because each of the following is a myth about working on yourself as a parent during estrangement. Myth number 1, it's a separate activity from working on the relationship with your child. Myth number 2, it's something to pass the time while you wait for things to improve on the other end. And the myths I'll talk about in the next episode, 128, will be myth number 3, you do it for your estranged adult child or children because they want you to. And myth number 4, you do it because you're not good enough and need fixing. As you might imagine, I'm eager to bust those other 2 myths, so please join me next time for part 2 of Working on Yourself. Until then, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.